Hello and welcome to another edition of Community Forum. My name is Joseph Feaster. I'm the host of the program. And as I always say, I always have exciting and informative guests on this program. And that's no different today. My guest today is a person, because we're in campaign season, is a person who is running for elective office here in Massachusetts. A gentleman who I've had just an opportunity to meet recently, but I feel like I've known him all my life. He's a person who has been in this community, having grown up in Brookline, a person who has been in state government, a person who has taught at my alma mater, Northeastern University. So he already has all of the good ingredients that I think will make for the position for which he's running for. But more importantly, he held important positions in state government, being an assistant secretary for transportation during the Patrick administration. My guest today is none other than the candidate for state auditor, Chris Dempsey. Hello, Chris. Welcome to Community Forum.
Joe, it's so great to be on with you and your viewers. Really delighted for the opportunity to be with you today.
Well, I'm really happy to have you, and I'm only going to have you for a short period of time because you're traversing all over the Commonwealth. And so I'm happy that you were able to come by and spend a little time with me and my executive producer, Roy Cohen, today. So I want our viewing audience to get a sense of who Chris Dempsey is. So I want to tell them a little bit about you, your background, your experiences. I'll let you give the story. I saw your picture of your lovely bride and all of that. So I'm going to let you tell the story about your background and experiences.
Thanks, Joe. I'm the son of public school teachers. My parents met while teaching at the Martin Luther King School in Grove Hall in Boston in 1970. They were placed in adjoining classrooms and they met and they fell in love. And I think it's fitting that I start with that because you may be able to tell I'm actually in a classroom today. I'm at Bristol Community College down in Fall River. We're on the South Coast all day today. And this was a place for us to stop after doing another television recording. So that's why you see the classroom behind me today. I saw over the course of their career, my parents digging into their own pockets to pay for school supplies for their students, as we know public school teachers do across the Commonwealth. And that's not right. That's the result of choices that we make on Beacon Hill. It's the result of money getting lost in the bureaucracy and not going to the places where it is going to have the biggest benefit, places like public education, public transportation, public health. And so I'm running for state auditor to make sure that every single dollar that we spend at the state level is spent in the places that are going to have the biggest impact on people's lives. And that when people know they're paying their taxes, that they can trust that that money is being spent wisely on their behalf. That is the role of the state auditor, to be the chief accountability officer. I'm excited about the reception that we've had across the state over the last year on the campaign trail. And we now have 2 weeks to go until the September 6th Democratic primary.
Well, well stated, certainly, Chris, and fine. My mother, she has passed, but she was a teacher in New York City for many, many years. Short woman, less than 5 feet, but she had a class. They would line up. They would go up the stairs because they didn't have elevators in the schools in New York, and even now in many of the schools that we have presently. So, but they would be lined up there when she got there. And also, my wife retired 2 years ago as a teacher, so I'm very much committed to the whole educational system. And so I'm glad to see that your parents were also educators and has joined that great legacy. But this is not your first rodeo. You've been, in elective office. You were a town meeting member in Brookline. You chaired the transportation board, and I suspect that's why Governor Deval Patrick selected you to be an assistant secretary because of that skill set. But what I want to do is this, because if you ask, I'm sure you're finding as you go across the Commonwealth, a lot of people just have no clue what the auditor's office does. Yeah. So why don't we educate the viewing audience on Community Forum as well?
So the incumbent state auditor is a woman named Suzanne Bump. She is the first woman to ever hold the office. She is the person who knows the job of state auditor the best. And she's not seeking re-election. She's endorsed me to succeed her. And I'm tremendously proud to have her endorsement in this race after her really strong career in public service over many decades, and the last 12 of them as state auditor. The auditor has a team of about 200 auditors and analysts, and we send them into every corner of the executive branch of state government to figure out what's working and what's not working and how things need to change. And then we issue reports and recommendations that point out how that change needs to happen. Now, I appreciate that for most of your viewers, they don't have the auditor's homepage or webpage as a homepage of their web browser. They're not going and reading all of those reports. And so it's really important in this role that we have someone who both understands the executive branch of state government, and I'm the only person in this race that has worked in the executive branch, but also someone who knows how to be an advocate for better state government. And Joe, that I worked, for example, as the co-founder of the grassroots group No Boston Olympics, and we can talk more about that.
I was going to ask you about that too, but when
Yeah.
you get, yes.
So I also served as the director of an advocacy group called Transportation for Massachusetts, fighting for better transportation and more investment in public transportation across Massachusetts. And everywhere I've gone, I've been able to create an impact with relatively limited resources. That's what you need in this role, because at its worst, what the auditor's office is just another place in state government that's creating reports that sit on a shelf. But at its best, it's a place to point out what's not working in state government, how things need to change, and then it's a robust advocate within state government to actually make sure that that change happens and benefits the lives of people across the Commonwealth. I'm so excited about that opportunity, and I can't think of a better job in state government, and that's why I'm running for this one.
Well, the interesting part, I've served the state government, and in turn, the auditor's office is, quite frankly, a watchdog. I think that's the terminology that would probably best resonate with our viewers, to understand you're the watchdog. You're going to make sure that the executive branch carries out its responsibilities that the public has given them, and it's your job to make sure that they do that in a fair and fiscally responsible way. And so, if I could just break it down for our viewing audience, that's how we would want to receive it. So to be able to say that that's what the role is. But I did look at that. I saw the piece about you're a fighter. I remember when there was a discussion going on about the Olympics. I'm not one of those young guys who just came around. I've been around here for Sura, and I remember when the discussion about bringing the Olympics here, and it was quite a robust and vigorous approach. And for you to have been able to, basically, I can now call you, if just wasn't No Boston Olympics, I can call you StopBostonOlympics.com is what it is. Talk about that particular effort, because it shows your feistiness and willing to take on, because you're up against some pretty heavy hitters in taking on that particular issue.
Yeah. So in 2015, some of the most powerful heavy hitters, as you call them, Joe, got together behind closed doors and they hatched this plan for the Olympics. And look, that plan was exciting for a lot of us. Why not show off Massachusetts on the world stage? But when you read the fine print of that proposal, you saw that it required that we had to build from scratch the most expensive Olympic stadiums and venues, including a proposal to build the Olympic stadium, to use it for 3 weeks, and then to tear it down after the Olympics. And all of that was going to be done, and this is the most important fact about the Olympics, all of that was going to be done with taxpayers signing a contract that says we as taxpayers, we're going to cover 100% of the Olympic cost overruns. And people know this history in other cities, and city after city, those cost overruns total billions and billions of dollars. We were on the hook for about $15 billion. And think about my parents and so many other school teachers digging into their own pockets to pay for school supplies. I did not want to see $15 billion spent on a 3-week sporting event when that was still the case in classroom after classroom, and we still have potholes in our roads, and we have public parks that aren't maintained the way that they should be, or community health centers and clinics that aren't maintained or upgraded as they should be. That's the most important stuff we do as a Commonwealth. And so I created in a living room a group called No Boston Olympics. And we went up against those heavy hitters, and we got outspent 1,500 to 1. They spent $15 million. We spent less than $10,000 on our side. But ultimately, we were effective for 2 reasons that you can appreciate, Joe, because you've done this in your career. Number one is that we had the facts and the data on our side, and we followed those facts and data. We brought them together, and we shared them with anyone who would listen. But number two, we got organized, and we had public meetings. We created that grassroots organization. And we showed that when people get organized in a democracy, that they really can win, even up against the odds and even getting outspent. By the end of that campaign, we had more individual citizen contributors to our campaign than Boston 2024 had to its campaign. Our average contribution size was $100. Their average contribution size, average, was $100,000. But my takeaway from that successful effort is that when you put good facts and good data in front of the people of Massachusetts, we make smart decisions. And again, that's the job of the state auditor, to dig into that executive branch, to figure out what's really happening, and then to put that data and that information back in front of all of us so that we can build a stronger Commonwealth together. That's why I'm running for this role, and I'm so excited about the opportunity. But absolutely, Joe, I've proven that I will be, and I have been, an independent watchdog and someone who will stand up to protect taxpayers, to protect the public interest. That's exactly what we need in this state auditor role.
Well, definitely, that was a tenacious effort on your particular part. Like I said, I was around with that battle. I was not in the midst of it. I was on the sideline having the popcorn and the cherry Coke. But nonetheless, I was downtown, and I do remember the conversation. And you were going up against a lot of the corporate community who was primarily funding that effort that you referred to. So, congratulations on that effort, and it proved to be true because so many other cities that hosted the Olympics wound up having major deficits and venues that they just mothballed after the Olympics ended. So,
And Joe,
proved to
look,
be true.
since that debate, which was in 2015, we've hosted the World Series, we've hosted the NBA Finals, we've got the World Cup coming up in a couple of years, coming back to Foxborough. So we know that we can host international sporting events. We just want to do it in a smart way. And that Olympics model is just not the right one for Massachusetts.
Yeah, and if I remember, there was something like, I don't know, it was an Indy 500, just some car race that was going to be coming here or did come here, at some point in time. So we are a major hub, and I know folks want to come here, but the reality is that it has to be smart,
That's right.
smart use of our resources.
That's right.
And to speak about the smart use of our resources, one of the things I prepare for these interviews. I don't do it, off the fly. So I went and took a look at who is Chris Dempsey. What is he? What does he stand for? I know, and I'm going to spend the time at the end before we close. I'm going to talk about all the endorsements because I want folks to know about them. So I'm going to talk about them, but for the moment, I want folks to say, okay, um, Chris Dempsey wants us to support him to become state auditor. And he's been in government before. He has worked in local government. Like I said, this is not your first rodeo as far as elective office, because elective town meeting is an elective office. At least out here, I believe that's true in Brookline as well.
Yep.
So you've been in an elective office. So let's talk about, you had four planks, if you will, four pillars for your policies. You talked about federal stimulus, you talk about climate, you talk about MBTA oversight, and then you talk about transparency, which you referred to earlier. Why don't you give a little bit of the meat on the bones for those four pillars that you have, just so, and our folks can go and read it, because you have your website, which I'm sure you're going to give the www.dempseyforauditor.com, and you're going to remind them of that again. And I'm sure Chris told you to remind them again and again and again. But in any event, let's talk about on those four pillars. Give them a sense of what your thoughts are about the implementation of those.
Yeah. Joe, I'm really proud that my campaign was the first in this race to put out policy plans about what we actually wanted to do in the office. In fact, we put out the first three before any other opponent put out any. And so we've really been leading when it comes to bringing new ideas to what this office can be. Our very first plan was on oversight of federal stimulus dollars. The state has $5.3 billion to spend, and we're proposing two core ideas there. Number one is that we want to track those dollars in as close to real time as possible. We want to avoid a situation where we spend all 5.3 billion and then we go in and audit it and we realize we didn't spend the money that well, but we can't spend that dollar again. You can only spend a dollar once. So we're going to track it in real time, and if we find we're not spending the money well, we're going to redirect it somewhere else. The second core part of that first proposal was to adopt many of the recommendations of what's called the Racial Equity Scorecard that was developed by the NAACP, the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, the Mass Public Health Association, and other organizations to develop some metrics around measuring how we're investing that money and where it's going and whether it's actually being used to address what we know is a persistent racial equality gap in Massachusetts. And that's work that's so important. I think if we start it here on the federal stimulus dollars, we can transfer it to other parts of state government and have it be a core part of our auditing function here in Massachusetts. So I'm excited about that and do encourage people to read that plan at dempseyforauditor.com. The second plan was on climate and environmental justice. And again, two main points here. The first is we're going to make the office a national leader by making it the first in the country to incorporate carbon accounting into our audits of state agencies. And that will allow us to hold those agencies accountable for the laws that are on the books that require them to reduce emissions. But second, and I think equally important here, is that when we tackle climate change, we can't leave anybody behind. And so I'm proposing to create an Auditors Commission on Environmental Justice so that people who are on the front lines of the climate crisis, maybe that means they live near a busy highway or near a power plant or in an area that's prone to flooding or severe weather, that they have a seat at the table on Beacon Hill so that their voice is heard. I'm deeply committed to that work. And then our third policy proposal was on reform and oversight of the Massachusetts State Police. And I have great respect for our troopers on the front lines. Over the course of this campaign, I have met two people who lost close loved ones in the line of duty as state troopers, but they have even said to me that they believe the agency needs more reform and more oversight. And we put out a 15-point plan to do that, where we're looking at everything from hiring to promotions to training to evidence handling. The list goes on and on there. So I think that gives people sort of a breadth of what the office can cover, from big global issues like climate change to more local, unique issues to Massachusetts, like reform of the state police. And let me just end with the fourth one you mentioned, which is on transparency.
Well, before you go there, I don't want you to miss. I don't want Chris to be calling me up and telling me, "Well, Joe, why didn't you ask him this question?" So I'm going to act like the folks on the big stations do, the MSNBCs and and the CNNs. I can't let you leave reproductive equity off the table. That is such an issue that is in front of us in this electoral time that I wasn't going to let you leave that one, and you have spoken on that. So
Sure.
why don't you speak to that as well?
Sure. Thank you for asking that question. And it's so important. It's on the front of all of our minds in the wake of the Supreme Court decision to end Roe versus Wade. This is an issue that is personal to me. I grew up, as you said, in Brookline, and I lived less than a mile from one of the abortion clinics that was attacked in the early 1990s, where an anti-choice terrorist killed people who were helping provide and administer abortion care for women. And I remember being in elementary school at the time and talking to my parents about what happened there and the need to make sure that people were protected. So as auditor, there's actually work we can do here. And I want to be a leader and an ally on this. One thing we can do is we can make sure that state dollars aren't going to fund what are called fake clinics, which are offices that purport to be providing legitimate healthcare to women, but in fact are not. And we want to make sure that they're not being used to deceive women about what their options might be. But I think secondly, and maybe most importantly, this is one of just 6 statewide elected positions, one of just 6. And it's really important that all 6 of those leaders are advocates and allies for reproductive rights and equity. And I want to be very clear here that this is not just up to women to be protecting reproductive care. This is up to men too. And I'm proud to be an ally and a supporter of reproductive freedom and equity. And I will continue that as one of just 6 statewide elected officials on Beacon Hill. So thank you so much for raising that, Joe, because I do know it's on people's minds, and I want people to know where I stand on that issue.
Well, there's one other that's on people's mind, and you have this in your pillars or one of your planks as well, with the construction work being done and the closing of the Orange Line. The MBTA is ever present on people's minds ever since last Friday and even before that. And you propose MBTA oversight. What do you propose in that regard, Chris?
So, Joe, this is another issue that's personal to me. My wife, Anna, commutes by MBTA. So every time she leaves to go to work and gives me a kiss on the cheek, I think about her safety on that system. And this is personal because I'm an MBTA rider myself. In fact, I will be the first statewide elected official to commute to Beacon Hill on the MBTA since Mike Dukakis left office in
Oh,
1991.
I was going to say, I was glad you said that. That was the governor I worked for. He was the
That's right.
MBTA man. But good. Go ahead.
So it's been over 30 years. And we're only going to make progress on fixing the T when we have more elected leaders who actually use the system on a daily basis. And I want to be very clear. This is not a campaign gimmick for me. This is how I get around. It's how I will be commuting to work, and I will be living the experience of the hundreds of thousands of MBTA riders that use it every day. But I also have experience working inside the transportation bureaucracy. When I was Assistant Secretary of Transportation for Governor Patrick, I co-founded the program that led to all of the smartphone apps that tell you in real time when your bus or your train will arrive. And we made the MBTA the very first transit agency on the entire East Coast to make those apps available to riders. So I'm proud of having made the MBTA an innovative place to be for the period of time that I was there. As auditor, we can make sure that the MBTA is following the recommendations of the Federal Transit Administration, which is today investigating the T on its safety issues and developing a report. I'll make sure the T actually follows that report. We'll also look at the Department of Public Utilities, which is tasked with safety oversight at the MBTA, but I don't think has the resources and the staffing that it needs to do its job. And then finally, I'm proposing to ask the legislature for an additional $2 million in the auditor's budget. And this is the only place on the campaign where I have said that we need more resources in the auditor's office, but a $2 million line item to create an auditor's office for MBTA accountability, where we can hire the expertise that we need. Engineers, people that have worked in transit operations, people that have worked in safety operations in large organizations, operating organizations like the T. Hire them and have them go into the MBTA, because we don't have that expertise today in the auditor's office. We need to develop that skill set, and I'm going to ask the legislature for that. I hope they'll provide that, and then we can be a partner to the next governor, the next general manager at the T, and other leadership to make sure that we are fixing that organization so people can trust when they get on a vehicle that they're safe, and that when they're spending a fare dollar at the fare box or a tax dollar, that those dollars are being spent well at the MBTA.
I'm going to come to your fourth plank, but I want to do a lead into it because I want to say to the viewing audience at least what I've come to understand about you. You are dogged in your approach. You are tenacious in that you are thorough. Uh, and now I want to talk about your transparency. You develop a whole process during this electoral cycle of being able to be forthright about what you have done. I know it because I've read your information relative to your responses to questionnaires that have come from labor organizations and other community organizations, be they climate, environmental, et cetera. And so talk to us about what your thinking was about that type of transparency, Chris.
Yeah. So, Joe, transparency is a word that gets thrown around a lot by a lot of people that are running for office, and they don't always back it up. In this case, I wanted to make sure that we were truly leading on transparency. So here's what we did. Over the course of a campaign, various groups will come to the candidates. They might be a labor union, they might be an environmental organization, they might be someone that represents another policy issue, reproductive rights. We talked about that one. They'll come to us and they'll say, we have a questionnaire for you to fill out. We want you to answer a set of questions, and then we're going to use that to evaluate whether or not we're going to endorse you in this race. And I'm fine doing that. I think it's perfectly reasonable for those organizations to ask us those questions. But I have also said that if they're going to do that, I want to make sure that we are publishing, and I'm publishing my answers on my website, so that it's not just those organizations that can read my answers, but it's anyone, any voter out there who wants to better understand where I stand on these issues. And I was the first candidate in the race to do that. So far, I'm still the only candidate in the race to do that. And I was truly proud when the Boston Globe editorial board actually wrote an editorial dedicated just to this idea of publishing questionnaires. And they called on every person who's running for statewide office in Massachusetts to follow my lead in being more transparent. I think it should be the new standard for candidates who are running for office in Massachusetts. I'm proud to be a leader on it. And I hope that your listeners and your viewers agree with that.
Well, we're coming to the close of the show. A half an hour goes very, very quickly, and I want to do a few things. I also want you to leave some time there for you to speak directly to the voters to be able to tell them why they should vote for Chris Dempsey for auditor. But I you know, I went down the list of endorsements, and I'm going to do it as if it was scrolling on the program. Boston Globe, Mayor Wu, the Boston Mayor, for those of you that don't know, Michelle Wu, the Communities of Color, the organization that I'm involved with, State Auditor Suzanne Bump, your predecessor. Yeah, and I'm saying predecessor because I'm assuming you're going to be there after the election. Mass Democratic Convention, you won the convention. Senate President Karen Spilka, Senate Majority Leader Cindy Cream, a number of other senators, many state reps from across the Commonwealth, many Boston City Councilors, Cambridge City Councilors, Cambridge Mayor Sadiqui, Worcester City Councilors, other mayors from across the Commonwealth, progressive organizations, Boston Ward and Democratic committees, environmental organizations, and on and on. So basically, everybody says Chris Dempsey's the man. He's the one that ought to be in this particular office. So I'm going to let you now, as we're coming to the close of the program, I'm going to let you tell the voters why they should vote for Chris Dempsey.
Well, Joe, I'm honored to have all of those endorsements, but the most important endorsement is the one that the voters will give me on September 6th. And that's why I'm here to ask for their vote, because it's up to them who's the next state auditor. And I hope to have their vote on September 6th. Look, I live 2.5 blocks from where I grew up and where my public school teacher parents still live with my amazing wife, Anna. We got married actually earlier this summer, so I'm still getting used to having this on my finger. But we live in the first floor of a triple decker, a couple of blocks from home. And Anna and I are looking forward to starting a family together. We want that to be in a Massachusetts that is the best that it can be. And that means making Massachusetts state government the best that it can be by making it more transparent, more accountable, more efficient, and more fair. And that's why I'm running for this role. I'd be humbled and honored to have the support of your viewers and your listeners today. And I'm so honored to have the chance to have a conversation with you, Joe, who's given so much to Stoughton and communities across the Commonwealth in your career. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. Wish you all the best on September 6th. Viewing audience, September 6th today, get out to vote. Chris Dempsey's a good man, and I guess you get a sense of where I stand on this particular candidate. So hopefully you'll join me on September 6th. Chris, Godspeed. Good luck on the campaign.
Thanks so much.